There are universal constants in this galaxy, laws as old as the stars themselves. The strong eat the weak, the hunter claims the hunted, and the smell of fresh blood is an ironclad invitation to violence. I am Xylothor, scourge of the charred peaks, and for 300 cycles, my life has been built on these truths. My scales are a history book written in scars. My horns have pierced the hides of creatures whose names are now just whispers in the dark, and my senses are a symphony of death. I can taste the fear coming off a fleeing glyptodon from a league away. I can hear the frantic, panicked heartbeat of a hiding skidipede under a meter of solid rock, and I can smell blood. I smell it on a molecular level, that tangy burst of ruptured cells, the metallic temps of iron oxidizing in open air, the subtle, sweet undertone of life becoming death. It's the single most intoxicating smell in the known universe. It's a song, a promise, and a command. It speaks of weakness, of opportunity, of a meal to be had, and dominance to be shown. Here on this ridiculous galactic outpost, Neutral Ground 7, a place crawling with 1,000 different species hiding in their little domes, the air is usually a sterile, recycled bore. It's just a mess of alien musks, artificial atmospheric cleaners, and the sickly sweet smell of nutrient paste. A predator like me finds it bland, uninspiring. I'm only here because the High Council decided it was a necessary political evil, a place to be seen and remind the softer races that we still exist. But today, something changed. A new scent cut through the usual garbage in the air like a razor. It was faint at first, just a whisper on the recycled currents, but there was no mistaking it. Blood, not the cold, dead fluid from a butcher's stall, but warm, fresh, and shockingly close. My head, a wedge of armored bone and fury, lifted. My secondary eyelids flicked back and forth as my vision sharpened. The pupils of my molten gold eyes shrunk into slits, scanning the crowd shuffling along the walkways. Aliens of all shapes and sizes, gelatinous blobs, insectoid Cathar, silicon-based golems. I could smell their anxieties, but none of them carried the signature of a fresh wound. Then the scent got stronger. It was coming from the observation deck overlooking the void, a place where the lesser species gathered to stare into space, probably thinking about how insignificant they are. My kind prefers to look at stars from a planet's surface, feeling the gravity under our claws, a reminder of the worlds we've conquered. My claws, each as long as a short sword, slid out with a soft snick, scraping quietly on the polished durasteel floor. A low growl started rumbling in my chest, a tectonic vibration that was felt more than heard. Around me, the station's chatter died. A gaseous philosopher from Rigel V just dissipated into a nervous fog. A pack of fenthounds whined and flattened themselves to the ground, ears pinned back. They knew that sound. They knew what it meant when a creature like me starts to hunt. My entire being was a weapon aimed at a single point, the source, and I found it was one of the new ones. A human, a soft-skinned biped from some backwater planet called Earth that had only just stumbled onto the galactic scene. Most species think they're a joke, fragile, short-lived, with no natural armor, no venom, no claws. They're just bags of water and ego who somehow lucked their way into space. That this one was standing with its back to me, leaning on the transparent barrier, looking out at the endless night. The scent was rolling off it in waves now, a beautiful, irresistible beacon. It was wounded, it was bleeding, it was prey. Every fiber of my 3-ton body tensed, my muscles coiled like immense springs. My wings, folded tight against my back, twitched with the urge to spread in a show of dominance. The hunt was on. The ancient laws were about to be enforced. I took a step forward, the sound of my claw on the deck echoing like a death bell in the Nausalan station. The human didn't even turn. My inner fire was roaring, the red haze of the hunt descending over my mind. I parted my jaws slightly, letting the scent wash over the sensory organs on the roof of my mouth. It was a perfect, powerful aroma, the promise of a kill. I was ready to tear flesh from bone. I took another step. The fenthounds started crawling backward, desperate to get away from the violence they knew was coming. The human just stood there, a statue of pure ignorance. It was an insult to the very nature of predator and prey. I let the growl in my chest deepen, to finally get its attention, to let it know its final moments were here. And then, a voice. It was calm, casual even, not a scream, not a plea for mercy. It was conversational. "Whoa there, big guy, relax." My entire being froze. The command, what else could it be? It was so completely wrong for the situation that it short-circuited centuries of instinct. The human slowly turned. Its face showed no fear, no panic. Its eyes, small and dark, weren't wide with terror but were amused. It brought up one of its soft, fleshy hands. A thin red line of its own blood was welling up from a small cut on its palm. It was wiping at it with a flimsy piece of cloth. "Relax." The air was thick with the intoxicating smell of a fresh wound, a scent that should have caused absolute terror. Every instinct I had, every genetic memory from a billion successful hunts, screamed that this creature should be either running for its life or paralyzed with fear. And yet, this human was unconcerned, annoyed, even, as if the bleeding was a minor inconvenience. like a buzzing insect. It had smelled its own death approaching, and its only response was to tell death itself to calm down. I had to understand. I had to know what kind of creature could bleed and feel absolutely no fear. My mind, a weapon honed for calculating attack vectors and exploiting weakness, was thrown into utter chaos. The word relax echoed in my skull. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a challenge. It was a casual dismissal, as if my predatory intent, the biological imperative that defined my very existence, was a minor overreaction. I held my ground, a statue of coiled muscle and simmering confusion. The growl in my chest died, replaced by a low, questioning rumble. My eyes, which could spot the twitch of a muscle on a mountainside a kilometer away, were now focused completely on this small, fragile being. I analyzed it. No visible sign, no personal energy shield. Its scent profile, aside from the tantalizing smell of blood, was shockingly clean. There was no spike of adrenaline, no bitter temps of cortisol. The chemical markers of fear, the human's heart rate, which I could feel as a subtle vibration in the floor, was as slow and steady as a meditating monk's. This was impossible. Was it a bluff? No creature in the galaxy has that kind of biological control. That's like telling your own cells not to break when you get stabbed. Was it ignorance? Also impossible. The fear of an apex predator is a primal, hard-coded instinct in anything that wants to stay alive. When I walk into a room, heart rates spike. It's a law of nature. My eyes went back to the wound on its hand. It was trivial, a thin red line on pale flesh. But blood is blood. A wound is a wound. It's a sign of vulnerability. It's the universe screaming that this creature's defenses have been breached. To my senses, that tiny cut might as well have been a gaping canyon. It was a dinner bell. The human followed my gaze to its own hand and made a soft, annoyed sound. It's nothing. Just a paper cut. The words registered, but the meaning made no sense. I tilted my massive head, a gesture of deep confusion that sent a nearby group of silicon lifeforms scrambling for cover. Paper cut, I projected the thought, my voice a gravelly rasp in the human's mind. Telepathy was just easier than trying to form their clumsy spoken words. The human, whose tag read Alex, blinked. It seemed surprised I could communicate, but not scared. Oh, right. You're telepathic, yeah, paper cut. I was reading a book, an old-fashioned one made of paper. Turned the page too fast, and the edge sliced my hand. My brain tried to process this. It had been injured by a sheet of processed plant matter. A tool for storing information had wounded it. The absurdity was staggering. My species carves our sagas onto the bones of our enemies with sharpened obsidian. The idea that a book could hurt you wasn't just alien, it was humiliating. Yet the human spoke of it like it happened all the time. You are wounded by your information. My thought voice was heavy with disbelief. Alex actually laughed. Not a hysterical shriek of fear, but a short, breathy chuckle of real amusement. Hey, I guess that's one way to put it. That happens constantly. Paper cuts, stubbing your toe on furniture, biting your own tongue. We're kind of fragile, in a clumsy sort of way. Every new term was a fresh mystery. Stubbing a toe, biting a tongue. He spoke of self-injury with such breathtaking carelessness. I've seen starships torn apart by micrometers. I've watched planets crack under tectonic stress. But the idea of a creature accidentally wounding itself just by existing, and then treating it as no big deal, was a new form of horror. My predatory instinct screamed that this was all wrong, that something was fundamentally broken in the natural order. The smell of blood meant prey. The prey should be scared. But this prey was standing here, bleeding from a self-inflicted wound from a book, and was teaching me its species vocabulary for minor OEs. This happens often. I pressed, my curiosity now a burning fire that overshadowed even my hunger. Oh yeah, all the time, Alex said, finally boiling up the now reddened cloth and stuffing it into a pocket. The bleeding seemed to have mostly stopped. Its body was already sealing the wound with an efficiency that was impressive. You should see a kitchen. Hot oil splatters, knife slips when you're chopping vegetables. You get a nice burn or a deep gash. It hurts. You yell a bit. You run it under some water, and then you finish making dinner. A burn, a gash, and then you finish making dinner. My species treats even the smallest injury with deadly seriousness. A broken claw or a cracked scale is a vulnerability a rival can exploit. It's a weakness you hide, healing in secret solitude. Any sign of injury is an invitation to a challenge, a signal that your time at the top is ending. We don't get burned and then finish making dinner. We retreat, we heal, and we kill anything that dares approach us while we're compromised. Your kind willingly does things where injury is a common result. I asked. The question felt stupid even as I formed it. Alex grinned, a bearing of blunt teeth that was meant to be friendly, but, in this context, just seemed unhinged. Friend, you have no idea. We have these things called sports. The word sports was new to me. But the way Alex said it filled me with a sense of deep dread. He leaned against the viewport again, completely relaxed, as if he were discussing the weather and not a complete breakdown of all sane biological rules. Take a game called hockey, he began, his tone light. We give 2 teams sharpened blades, skates, and strap them to their feet to move at high speeds on frozen water. We give them long carbon fiber sticks, and the goal is to hit a solid rubber disc into a net. So far it sounded like a bizarre but maybe harmless ritual. I stayed silent, waiting for the horrifying twist I knew was coming. Of course, Alex went on. It's fast and aggressive. So smashing into another player at high speed isn't just common, it's part of the strategy. We call it a body check. It often results in broken bones, ribs, legs, arms, and since we're swinging these hard sticks around, sometimes one hits a player in the face, shatters a jaw, or knocks out teeth. In fact, losing your teeth is a badge of honor for a lot of players. And the blades on their feet, sometimes they slice open a leg, or worse. There was a famous case where a player's throat was accidentally cut by a skate. He almost bled out right there on the ice. My mind recoiled. A flood of images, a ritual war, voluntary high-speed collisions, shattered bones, lost teeth as a mark of pride, accidental, near-fatal wounds treated as a known risk of the game. And the victim of the throat slashing, what happened to the one whose throat was cut? I had to ask. Or the team doctor rushed out, pinched the artery closed with his fingers, and got him to the locker room. They stitched him up, and he was back playing a few weeks later. The fans gave him a standing ovation, Alex said with clear admiration. I was speechless. A creature of my size, if I took a throat wound, would enter a berserker rage, killing everything in sight until I either bled out or the threat was gone. Then, if I survived, I'd retreat to my deepest lair for a full cycle to recover. This human species treated a near decapitation as a workplace accident, and the survivor was applauded for what? For not having the good sense to die. There's another one, Alex said, clearly enjoying this, totally oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing in a 3-ton apex predator. It's called rugby, no pads, no armor. The whole point is to run into the other team as hard as you can. They tackle you by grabbing you and throwing you to the ground. Broken noses are so common they don't even stop the game for them. Players get cauliflower ears, where their ear cartilage gets shattered from repeated hits until it just heals into a lumpy mess. They get concussions, where your brain literally slams against the inside of your own skull. He paused, looking at my motionless form. You're a big guy. You'd probably be good at it. The suggestion was so insane I almost roared in disbelief. He was inviting me, Xylothor, scourge of the charred peaks, to participate in a ritual of mutual self-mutilation. I tried to fit this into my own worldview. On my home world, combat is for one of 3 reasons: food, territory, or mating. It's always life or death, and it's always avoided if possible. To seek out injury, to celebrate it, to build games around the certainty of it. This was not sane behavior. This was the behavior of a species that didn't fear damage, a species that saw pain as a temporary and acceptable state of being, and a species that doesn't fear damage has no concept of its own limits. How do you intimidate a creature that considers a shattered jaw an occupational hazard? How do you threaten a being that views brain damage as a consequence of a weekend hobby? The smell of Alex's blood was still in the air, but it was no longer an invitation. It was a warning. The blood itself wasn't the point. The point was the creature it came from, a creature so used to the scent of its own lifeblood that it could stand calmly before predator and lecture it on the cultural significance of broken bones. My silence stretched, thick and heavy. I was no longer a predator watching its prey. I was a scholar facing a terrifying, incomprehensible text. The human, Alex, seemed to sense the shift in my mind, the change from hungry aggression to profound, horrified curiosity. You don't get it, do you? He said softly. The amusement was gone, replaced by something older, more somber. You see this? He held up his hand, where the bleeding had stopped, leaving only a thin red line, and your instincts scream weakness, compromised, easy meal. Right. I didn't answer, but my stillness was its own confession. On your world, Alex continued, his gaze turning back to the stars. A wound is a death sentence. It attracts rivals, scavengers, infection. Your evolution programmed you to avoid injury at all costs, to be perfect, untouchable. An apex predator is one that never gets hurt. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes seeming to pierce right through my armored hide. We didn't have that luxury. He took a breath, and the story that came next was the key, the final piece of the puzzle that reassembled my entire understanding of the universe, our world. Earth, it's not like most of the garden worlds out here. The Galactic Council classifies it as a Class 12 Deathworld. I'm told that's the highest rating they have. Most species that get smart do it on planets where the main challenge is intellectual outthinking a rival, developing tools to overcome a stable environment. They evolve in relative peace. Humanity never had that. On Earth, everything was trying to kill us, all the time. He spoke with a chillingly matter-of-fact tone. We didn't have the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth. We weren't the fastest or the strongest. We didn't have venom or natural armor. So what was our evolutionary edge? We endured. Our bodies evolved to be ridiculously, stubbornly resilient. A broken bone for us isn't a death sentence. It's an inconvenience. Our skeletons are designed to break and then heal. often stronger than before. We have an immune system that's in a constant state of hyper-aggressive war against trillions of microscopic invaders that cover every surface of our world. He gestured to his own body. When we get hurt, something interesting happens. Our bodies don't just feel pain and fear. They flood our system with chemicals. Adrenaline, for a burst of strength and speed, to help us fight or run even when we're wounded. Endorphins, to numb the pain, to let us keep thinking, keep moving, keep fighting long after another species would have died from shock. My mind reeled. He was describing a biological combat system. His species made its own performance-enhancing drugs on demand, triggered by the very act of being hurt. A human in pain wasn't a weakened human. It was a medicated human, a more dangerous human. Our planet's gravity is punishingly high, Alex went on, his voice a low monotone. That's why our bones are so dense, why we have so much muscle for our size. The weather can swing from freezing ice storms to searing heat waves in a single day. We have tectonic plates that constantly grind against each other, causing the ground to split open. We have volcanoes that can blot out the sun for years. Our world is in a constant state of trying to tear itself apart, and we just built cities on it. He paused, letting that sink in. For millennia, the single greatest threat to a human wasn't a predator. It wasn't a disease or a natural disaster. It was another human. And there it was, the final soul-crushing truth. We fought each other, he said, his voice barely a whisper. We fought over everything. Land, food, beliefs, pride. We perfected the art of killing our own kind. We used sticks and stones, then swords and arrows, then guns and cannons. We invented chemical weapons, biological plagues, and finally, atomic bombs, weapons powerful enough to set the atmosphere on fire and scour all life from the planet. Our entire history is one long, unbroken story of violence and survival. We became the apex predators on a world that tried to kill us every single day. And we did it by being more relentless and harder to kill than everything else, including ourselves. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I understood. It wasn't fear, it was a deep, profound, and terrible weariness. The look of a creature born from an unending line of struggle. So when a predator like you, he said, his voice free of malice, a magnificent, powerful creature built for a universe with clear rules, smells a drop of my blood, you smell an opportunity. But you're not smelling weakness, Zyla. You're smelling the legacy of 1 billion years of pain. You're smelling a species that learned to treat grievous injury as a Tuesday afternoon. The blood isn't a signal that I'm prey. It's a reminder that my ancestors survived worlds and wars that would have shattered your entire civilization. The station was silent. My hunter's haze was long gone, burned away by the terrifying fire of this revelation. I looked at the human Alex, this small, soft-skinned being, this descendant of madmen who had waged war with their own planet, their own biology and their own kind. I, Xylothar, who had inspired terror in 100 systems, felt a new emotion. It wasn't fear of the human strength. It wasn't the fear a predator feels for a stronger one. It was a deeper, more existential dread, the horror of the unknown. The galaxy operated on rules I understood. Strength, speed, instinct. Humanity was a walking rejection of all those rules. They weren't strong like I was strong. They were persistent. They were an entire species of woundwalkers, of mythical berserkers, who only got more determined with every injury. How do you defeat a creature that just refuses to die? The scent of blood wasn't appetizing anymore. It was chilling. It was the scent of a story I wanted no part of. It was the smell of a species that had looked into the abyss of its own violent nature and hadn't blinked. My claws, which had been extended for the kill, retracted with a soft final click. My muscles coiled for a strike. I took a step back, a gesture of concession I hadn't made in over a century. Alex watched me, his expression unreadable. Then he gave a small nod, as if acknowledging my decision. He reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small, rectangular object. He unwrapped it, revealing what looked like layers of processed food. He held it out to me. Sandwich, he offered, just nutrient paste and some synthesized protein. But it's not bad. The casual friendly gesture was the most terrifying thing of all. He had just laid bare the horrifying truth of his species, who had explained why he was the most dangerous type of creature in the known universe. And now he was offering to share his lunch. I took another step back, shaking my massive head. The human simply shrugged and took a bite of his food. I turned and walked away. The other species on the station scattered from my path, their fear a palpable wave. But it wasn't me they should have been afraid of. I was a known quantity, a monster with rules. The human was something else, a monster from a world where the rules don't apply. A monster who could get cut by a book, complain about it, and then calmly explain to a dragon why its history was more violent than any predator's worst nightmare. As I retreated to the quiet of my ship, a single horrifying thought burned in my mind. We are not alone in the universe, and maybe we should be. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more tales of humanity's strange and terrifying place in the cosmos, be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the galaxy.